Hi, so I want to answer the question how to choose a food plan. So first of all, I want to tell you that I am not a really big fan of using food plans. I think that using a food plan, it's looked at as an optional tool. So in addiction recovery, in the program, you'll find the 12 steps of addiction recovery, and then you'll find a separate list for the tools. So I don't know if you have been presented with these. I'll post a link below for the 12 steps of addiction recovery and also the tools of OA. I will also do a separate video about the difference between the two. I think it's really, really important to understand that, like probably vital to your recovery important. But the food plan is on the list of tools, of optional tools. A lot of people come into the program and think that's a requirement of how they have to do it. The Overeaters Anonymous book does specifically talk about, trying to identify foods that are your trigger foods, your alcoholic foods, your red foods, things that you should swear off for the rest of your life. I personally think that's kind of a harmful way of trying to move into the program because it takes too much of your energy and focus away from working just the 12 steps of recovery, none of which say stop your addiction or stop eating the food. And the 12 steps of recovery, that's where you're really going to find the hope and healing that you're looking for, the help, the recovery, the freedom. Those bring all of those things. So trying to work a food plan, in my opinion, it really just splits up your energy focus into trying to wrestle the food. In my experience, I didn't find recovery until I was like, screw it, I'm just going to do the 12 steps no matter what I'm doing with the food. Because I kept creating a food plan and trying to swear off sugar for the rest of my life. And I was so into the sugar, I felt like I was just so addicted to the sugar that I just couldn't stop. I would start the steps, start the steps in conjunction with starting a food plan, meaning I was giving up sugar. And I would try and fail and try and fail and try and fail over and over again. Then I'd give up for a period of time, hit a new rock bottom, and then try and fail all over again. And so it wasn't until I got to a point where I was like, man, I just cannot let go of this sugar thing. The sponsor had told me, a new sponsor had mentioned like, hey, it's really not about the food as much as it is about like overeating. It's not about specific ingredients. It's the overeating that we're really into. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll try to not overeat then and just try not to overeat sugar, I guess. And anyway, it wasn't until I moved into this new way of doing things, into that new model, that I was like, okay, so whatever I'm doing with the sugar, then I'm just going to keep doing the 12 steps of addiction recovery no matter what. And as I did that, what I discovered, what happened, was that the more I spent that time doing the 12 steps, specifically, the more that I was trying to identify the places where I was becoming emotionally dysregulated and inviting my higher power to come into that space to help to regulate me and let go of my resentment and fear and all of that stuff, the more it calmed me. And as it calmed me, I reached for the food less and less. So basically, as I was in that place of trying to monitor my spiritual and emotional health in real time and use God to try to calm me down, I found that it took my cravings away. I didn't have the craving. That's when I really discovered how much of an emotional eater I was, that it was like, whoa, like if I'm really emotionally dysregulated, I'm just running to food to try to regulate me. Sugar was a really great way to change my state very quickly, my emotional state. But I found that God did it better, faster, and it lasted way longer than the sugar did. So as I instituted this new practice of inviting God into that space with me to help calm my nervous system down, my cravings for sugar went away. Now, I still enjoy sweets. I still eat them, but I don't binge on them. I don't eat them in ways they weren't intended to be used. I have dessert sometimes. I have candy sometimes, but I'm not in a place where I'm emotionally eating them. When I'm eating dinner with my family and we have dessert, I'll have a serving of whatever we're having and that's enough. Or sometimes I just don't even feel like eating it. It just depends. If I feel like it, I'll eat it, but it's not like it used to be. I'm a normal eater now. And I got here without using a food plan. Because like I said, when I was in that model of trying to institute a food plan, it just split my energy. And I won't even say split my energy. It swallowed my energy. It took all of my energy to try to do the food plan. And then I just kept failing. So I found that in trying to surrender to God and trying to surrender to the food, I just couldn't do either because the food was just keeping me so trapped. And so I felt like I was the one failing, not the program, not God. I thought I was the one failing. But really, if you look at it, if you think that you have to give up the food in order to successfully work the steps, it just kind of creates this circular thing that doesn't make sense. Because if you think, okay, in order to recover, I have to first build a dam to keep my food at bay. Then there's room for God to come in and help me out. Okay, you build the dam. Well, then why do you need God? What is it exactly He's supposed to be coming in and doing for you? You didn't need Him for the dam. You did that by yourself. Well, for me, I couldn't build the dam. I never could. So I could never get to that next phase where, I had the dam built. Now God can come in and do His part. I was never successful at building the dam. But God was in the middle of my addiction, in the middle of the binging, in the middle of the food, in the middle of all of that. I learned to call on my higher power to come in, to help calm my nervous system, to help calm me down. And it took care of my cravings. So He was able to do what I never was able to do for myself. No food plan was ever enough to get me to the end. Now, I will say, though, you might still opt to use a food plan. If you do, then you do. And I'm sure you'll find the right plan that works for you, the right way to do it. And maybe there's medical, requirements that you have in your life, and maybe there is a food plan that you need to follow for health reasons. I totally get it. But I would strongly, strongly encourage you that if you decide to use a food plan, do it with the understanding that it is completely independent from what you're doing with the 12 steps of addiction recovery. There's not a single step that says to have a food plan. So if you find that you're trying to do a food plan and you are failing at it, if you're not doing a good job, do not start over on step 1. Keep going. Wherever you are in that process, keep going. I could never get through step 4 without going back to food. I never could. I would get to step 3 and try to give up the food, build that dam, and then be ready to move into step 4. And step 4 is a place where you're making an inventory of all the big feelings that you've been accumulating in your life, your whole life. That was such an emotional place for me, especially because I was at the time still in the middle of living through a lot of trauma. And so trying to move through that without food, that food was the way that I knew how to get relief. I hadn't learned how to get relief with my higher power yet. And so at the time, where I was in my healing, where I was in my recovery, it was too much to give. I couldn't give up the food, not in that space. But finally, one day I just said, I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm going to get to the end of step 4, regardless of what I'm doing with the food. And I did. And as I continued to move on and progress through the program, I had miraculous spiritual transformations. I'm not in the food today. I live free of food cravings. Like I said, I have a very healthy and peaceful relationship, even with sugar, which was my binge food of choice for decades. I have a very peaceful relationship with it. And so I have found that there are foods that I no longer really enjoy. I haven't sworn them off. I haven't restricted them out of my life. It's just that as I learned to manage my emotional state using my higher power and found that relief, I saw food different. There were foods that I used to reach for to binge on. I thought I loved those foods, but I realize now, oh no, they just changed my state really, really fast, my emotional state. So I was very emotionally dependent on them, but physically, I don't like the way they make me feel, and they're not that great. Some of them are like, it's a little too rich for me, or it always makes me have a lot of indigestion, and so I just have found naturally there are foods that I don't really like that much on this side of recovery. So I just don't really eat them that often, or sometimes I don't even eat some of the foods I don't eat at all. But there's still, an assortment of sweets and things that I do love. I think I love sweets now, maybe for the first time in my life. I thought I loved sugar before. No, I just loved the way that it made me feel. And now that God makes me feel that way times 10, better, faster, and it lasts longer, I just don't have use for food the way I used to. I don't have use for some of those foods at all anymore. And so, how do you choose a food plan? I will always say, whatever you do, just do it prayerfully. Recognize the difference between the 12 steps and the tools. And if you do decide to use a food plan, use a food plan. I support you on your journey, whatever that looks like for you. But just keep doing the steps no matter what is happening with your food plan. If you do a food plan and you fail and you bomb, just keep moving through the steps. And what you'll see as you do both side by side is you do the God thing and the food thing, it'll become really clear to you very quickly which one gives you satisfaction and which one gives you the relief that you are most looking for. And when you're in that space, side by side, doing the food thing and the God thing, and you see which one serves you best, it'll be easy to choose past the food to choose to do the God thing the next time. It gets easier and easier. For me, my addiction unraveled itself beautifully, naturally, peacefully, until I got to where I am today. I love my relationship with food. It's amazing. No food plan required. So there you go. I hope that helps.